Well, good morning, friends. This is Frank again, your friendly job recruiter and job developer. This is going to be number 4 in a series of job search. And we talked briefly now about resumes and formatting your resume. Also, I wanted to mention that your resume should be clean. And what I mean by clean is there should be enough white spaces in between your paragraphs and lettering. This helps the automatic tracking systems that they use to pick up your resume more clearly and doesn't confuse their system. I would keep away from photographs on your resume, italicized words, things of that nature. Again, try to keep your resume as clean and simple as possible. If you were to read it, does it make sense that the employer would feel it made sense as well? Okay, today, being Friday, you'll notice I'm a little bit more casual. I mentioned early on that if you are in pursuit of a new job and on your job search, you should put in at least Monday through Thursday, at least 4 to 5 hours a day, 20, 21 hours a week for your job search. But today, I just want to kind of kick back a little bit, chill, and just talk about some things that people have said, believe it or not, in an open interview. And again, these were things that HR departments over the United States have compiled over the number of years. So I'm going to share some of these things with you. And again, believe it or not, these are things that people have actually said in an interview. So let's start with number one. A question is asked to a young man. He's about 34 years of age, and he says, "So, what brings you to us today, and what interest do you have in our current position?" So, here was his answer. He says, "Well, I still live at home with my parents, and my parents felt it was about time that I go out and find a job." Can you believe that? That must have floored the person interviewing this guy. And I don't know exactly what they said to him, but I don't think they probably moved on with this character. So again, these are things that people actually say. Now, let me tell you about an experience that I personally had as a hiring manager. This was probably about 20 years ago. I had a man come to my interview. He was in mid 40s, seemed articulate, intelligent. His resume was superb. And we're going on in the interview, and we got not even halfway through the interview. Everything was fine, and all of a sudden, he goes like this. And I stopped. I says, "So what happened?" "Oh, there was a spider coming down." "Well, okay, well, I can see that." Well, as we proceeded with the interview, believe it or not, 3 more times this guy, you know, and so, and he wouldn't even comment anymore at that point. So, you know what I did? I kind of found a way to end the interview and figure, this guy's probably a noodle case. He's short of a few noodles. So I just wrote on the application failed and put it in red and circled it, and I excused him out of the interview. And so he even was so clueless as to say, "Well, so what's going to happen now? Am I going to be called back for a second interview?" I said, "Well, we'll let you know." Again, the funniest things that people will do. Um, Another interview that happened. Now, at this time, I was hiring manager at a bank, and I was there was 3 other people making the decisions on this hire. I was going to be the fourth and the final decision maker. Well, everybody seemed to love this particular gal, and they said she did great in the interview. And so I scheduled her for a Friday afternoon at 1:30, so this way I had time to get lunch and come back and get ready for the interview. So again, keeping in mind that I already had in my mind that, man, she seemed like a great fit for the position. So she was in our conference room that had a door on it. I opened the door and shut the door, and I introduced myself, and here she's sitting here like this. Okay, that wasn't a good start, to sit here like this. So then she kind of had this look on her face too, like, come on, this is the fourth interview. Like, am I going to get the job or what? All right, well, so we go ahead with the interview. Now, I want you to keep in mind that this position, I was a call center manager, and as a call center representative that this girl was applying for, it meant that you had to be flexible with your hours. You had to be on the phone a lot because that was, your primary responsibilities. You had to have good teamwork. So I focused my questions around exactly that. Do you know she failed every one of them? I said let's talk about, as an example, I says, can you describe to me what type of team player you are? She says, well, I'm more of a lone wolf, but if I have to work in a team, okay. Didn't like that answer. Then we talked about flexibility. I mentioned to her that in a call center at any given time, and as much as possible, we would try to give at least a 10-day notice if we needed to change your schedule. But I said you need to keep in mind that there will be times that you will be called upon to change your schedule. And she says, well, I'm not really that flexible. I like to know at least a couple of weeks ahead of time if something like that's going to happen, but I'm not too open to that. Okay, so we went through the interview, got done with her, and I escorted her out. So on the way back upstairs, two of the other managers says, Frank, how did she do? Did she do good? I says, don't ever let her in the door. and they says, my God, what happened? And again, keep in mind, three other people, including an HR representative, loved her. So I don't know if she was just off kilter that day, or again, it's a Friday afternoon. I was her fourth and fifth interview, but I don't even think she knew that I was going to be the final decision maker. So I think she let her guard down, and I think she blew it. But again, I explained to the other hiring managers these were the type of questions that you should have posed to her. And they says, well, Frank, we want to thank you, and we learned a valuable lesson, and from now on, we definitely will, consider them in our interview process. So, it's interesting going back to the other gentleman who said, well, I'm 34 years old, maybe my parents think I should find a job, to this gal who is kind of like, well, is so-so and this and that. If you don't come across being positive and energetic and to show some self-motivation, the person interviewing you is going to make notes of that interview because, again, they either need to go back and consult with other managers about what was said in the interview, or you may want to remember on your own if you're going to be the only decision maker about what this individual said. Because, again, keep in mind, you may go through maybe 7, 8, 9 interviews for a particular position, and it just may not be on the top of your head fresh, everything that everybody said or what you said. So, but you want to keep in mind that these decisions that are being made, a lot of times it can solely depend on your input to them. Okay. So, couple, maybe one other funny one, if I think back. We had a situation where it was a panel interview, and I'll talk about that in a moment, about panel interviews. But in this panel interview was our HR director, me as the hiring manager, and we had a couple other supervisors. Now, this particular gentleman, we actually coached him prior, which doesn't usually happen, but we coached him prior to the interview about some of the things we'd be looking for. And one of the questions that we would be asking him is about tell us something about yourself. Listen to what this noodle did. He comes to the interview, and the very first question that one of the supervisors asked him, please tell us something about yourself. Well, I'm a tree hugger. Yeah, I love trees. I love the open wilderness. Now keep in mind, this guy is a Q&A person working in a machine shop. What the hell does trees have to do with his job description? So again, we even coached him before the interview about what not to say, and he went off on this tree stuff. And so, matter of fact, we were even going to let him go through the whole interview before we said anything, but we stopped right there. And we said, before we continue on, we want to give you some valuable feedback. And again, we mentioned to you the type of statement we were looking for about tell us something about yourself, which is a professional career statement. Okay. We don't care about his hobbies at that point. We don't care about he loves trees. Now, if he was applying for a tree surgeon, I mean, this guy be the man, because he just loves trees so much. But again, so keep that in mind. Now, I mentioned about panel interviews. A panel interview can go either two different ways. It can be where the management will decide to bring in, and they'll normally let you know ahead of time, but they will bring in maybe 3, 4, or 5 people, and they'll sit across from you, and they will all question you. They can be quite intimidating, granted, but I've done so many of them that I've learned, they're only human as well. I don't care if there's 20 of them, they're still human. But on the other hand, I've been in panel interviews where it's the opposite, where maybe there's only a couple of managers there, and then there's 4 or 5 of candidates, and I'm one of the candidates. I love those type of interviews, and let me tell you why. I always hope that I never get to be chosen to be the first one to speak. Why? Because I want to listen to the answers that my fellow candidates are giving, so this way, whether it's right, wrong, and different, at least I have some fuel to think about. Now, let me tell you about this one particular one. This was my 4th interview, and there would be a total of 7 interviews altogether. In my 4th was a panel interview with the VP. It was a human resource director, and it was 2 other managers. Okay, and now in this case, not only did they have a panel, but they brought in 4 of us candidates. Okay. So fortunately, I got to listen to all the other questions and answers. So when it came to my turn, I really shined. Now, what was funny to me, these guys, which I didn't have, these guys were all degreed people. They had skill level up to the yin yang. Some of the things, quite frankly, I didn't have. But you know what? I won the interview. And on the way out, we were going down the elevator, and I was with the other 4 gentlemen, and they looked at one another with their briefcases, and I said, "Well, I guess there's no sense us coming back, man. You tagged it, And I says, "Well, you shouldn't feel that way. I mean, everybody's chance is as good as the other. So I mean, I wouldn't put myself into a psych situation where I feel that maybe I'm not in the running anymore." And that's very important. Don't ever psych yourself to the point where you think you're a failure and that you may not get called back, because I've been surprised myself. There's been interviews that I've done that I didn't think I did too, good on, but yet they called me back and they liked me. So again, but again, that's what can happen. Panel interviews can be very powerful on both sides. So if you get into a situation where you're going to do a panel interview, try to embrace it, and try to learn as much as possible. And remember that if only you against 4 others in a panel, as far as management team goes, you're going to have to impress all of them. So what I want you to do is make good contact and try to move your eyes to cover all 4 of them at the same time, if you can. Granted, there may be times that you may focus your eyes on one individual for a few seconds, but catch yourself doing that. Now, I'm Italian, and us Italians, we love talking with our hands, right? Okay. There was a joke that I used to tell people years ago about being Italian. I said, well, the reason why us Italians talk with our hands is all that spaghetti we eat, it gets wrapped around our armpits and our vocal cords, and we're, Okay, well, the thing is that you don't want to get into a situation where you end up like a guy like me who's always talking with his hands. So you know what I had to start learning how to do? I put my hands down on the tabletop, and God help me not to move those hands. Because it's a conscious effort for a guy like me to have to make. I want them not to be distracted. I don't want to have spiders coming out of the skies, and I don't want going like this, woo, 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 and and then they're looking at my hands and distracts them. So if you're the type of person that has to talk with your hands, unfortunately, if you're the type of person that talks with your feet will be under the desk anyway, so don't worry about it. Okay, so these are the things that you need to think about when it comes to your interview. And I was trying to think maybe just one other funny story. Of course, I'm sure there's plenty I can think about if I really put my thinking cap on, because people say the darndest things. Years ago, now I'm dating myself here, but there was a gentleman by the name of Art Linkletter that used to have a show that says kids say the darndest things. And Art Linkletter, he would have a panel of children sitting on stools, and he would go around and ask them questions. Some of them pertain to their parents or whatever, and you wouldn't believe some of the funniest things and embarrassing things children would say about their parents. Okay, so again, you got to keep in mind that funny things happen, and sometimes adults say the darndest things more than kids do. Okay, so I think that's enough for today. Again, if you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, please. I'd appreciate it. Hit the like and notification button, and I will see you soon. Bye.